Well, first of all, welcome to the Just Japan podcast. And I
Thank
was
you.
wondering if you could tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself and who you are and where you are.
Yeah, my name is Emily Bell. I am my father is Kurt Bell, who you just had on the podcast a couple
He was on
weeks
the
ago.
last episode. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
the
right.
last
Yeah.
episode. Okay. Then yeah. Hi, I'm Emily. I was born in Santa Barbara, California in 2000. And then when I was two, my parents took me, well, like we all moved to Japan,
Okay.
where my mom is from, Shizuoka. And then I spent my years from 2 to 14, I spent my entire childhood in Shizuoka.
Okay.
And then when I was 14, my parents brought us back to America. And since then, this is my ninth year here. So I want to say I spent like 10 years, like
Yeah.
both countries. And then I'm graduating. Well, I spent high school and college here in California. And then
Okay.
I'm about to graduate Cal State Fullerton, and I'm moving back to Japan in a week.
Wow. That's super exciting. That's really cool. Transitions are always exciting and sometimes stressful. Actually, no, they always are, even whether it's good or bad, as moving tends to be that way. Um,
I feel like the overwhelmingness of moving is kind of keeping my nerves down right now. I'm just like I'm not thinking about it too much because I'm so busy, but once
yeah.
I'm like on the plane and I have like nothing to do, I think it's gonna really sink in and be like, wow, I'm moving back to Japan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. That's a fantastic. So, I guess I want to jump into a few things you've talked about. I'm curious, of course, to learn a bit about that childhood in Japan, about that transition back to America, what that was like for you, and then, of course, you've made some very big life decisions to head back to Japan. So I guess, I want to first kind of jump into talking a little bit about that childhood, that 2 to 14
Yeah.
years where you were in Shizuoka, because I mean. My own kids were born in Kobe, and
Mhm.
they left. They would have left Japan, when they were quite a bit younger than you were. So both my kids were born there. My son was just turned 7 when we left Japan, and my daughter had just was like about 4, and
Mhm.
we had made the move to China at that time for my work. So for you, I'm curious. What are some kind of memories you have of growing up in Shizuoka? Obviously, it's not Tokyo.
No.
Very different place. So, yeah, just I'm curious, like, what was it like to grow up there for you?
For me, it was just like every other Japanese kid, like growing up in the countryside. I was very lucky to be in a community. Like it was very like a tight-knit community of like farmers and a lot of grandparents, like a lot of not a lot of kids, but more like grandpa, grandmas taking care of little kids. And it was like a
Okay.
little cute, homey community for me. And like my biggest memory, or like my entire childhood is pretty much on YouTube. I'm sure you know, but um, like my dad would take me hiking and my dad would like film wherever we go and then it's on YouTube. So I think like experiencing the little things, like being able to ride a bike for the first time and like all these like parents are watching me, like it was such a small community that we all
Okay.
knew
Yeah.
each other. And I think that is such a uniquely Japan thing or like a small
Mm,
community thing.
yeah, yeah. Small community thing, I think, more than
Yeah.
anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never lived in Tokyo. Like I don't know what it's like to be in the city, but for me, I was really lucky to be like surrounded by nature as well. Like that is such a big thing for me. Like I still love being in nature and the
Mm,
whole like the Japan like forest thing. I've
yeah.
never seen anything like that outside of Japan. Like the whole like the deep forests and
Yeah.
the cultural differences as well. Like I was really lucky to experience that as a child and I do hold on to that a lot.
It's neat
Yeah.
hearing you reflect back on that in such a positive way, because it's a lot to unpack there, which is really cool. So I mean, you mentioned, you can see all your my childhood on YouTube. That's an interesting thing. I mean, I how did I get to meet your father? Well, through doing
Mhm.
something similar. I was documenting kind of my life as an expat in Kobe, and I definitely did share a lot of my two kids kind of growing up.
Yeah.
And maybe at first, in those kind of earlier days of YouTube, a lot of people were like, "What are you doing? That's kind of odd. What's YouTube? What's this and that?" But
Yeah.
one thing I really now appreciate is I look back on it, and even my wife has made this comment, and my kids have even made this comment. Like my son, he thinks it's really cool and he's happy I did that because it's really neat to kind of look back and see those places. And even my daughter, I mean, she left when she was only 4. So her memories,
Mhm.
a lot of memories weren't deeply formed. But like sometimes we find ourselves like just maybe even we're just like, sitting on the sofa and looking at my phone and watching some videos where she can see herself like toddling around in the old neighborhood or at the playground by our place in Kobe. And they think it's pretty cool that those memories are there now.
Mhm.
So that's a neat thing. But I also the appreciation for nature is something cool because I think a lot of kids find that like they're being, they are kind of reluctant. They're being dragged kicking and streaming to a lot of these places sometimes, and then afterwards they kind of look back and they're like, ah, I get it.
Yeah, that's how exactly how I felt like when I was there in the moment. Sorry, my dog is scratching the door. One second.
No problem.
Ollie, wanna come in? Come on. There you go. Sorry about that.
No problem.
There he
Um,
is.
yeah,
But like me being like a preteen, like a 13, 14-year-old, like middle schooler, I was definitely like, oh, like I want to be in Tokyo. I want to
yeah.
experience all these like cool city things. But looking back at it, like I spent a couple months in Tokyo last summer as like an
Mhm.
intern. I did an internship in Tokyo, so I did spend some time in Tokyo, and it was like I look back at my time in Shizuoka, and I was like, wow, like that was such a blessing to have that kind of more of a warm, welcoming, slow, kind of more tight-knit community.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that I look back on and appreciate.
No, absolutely. When you have that kind of you can do that comparison and contrast, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I grew up in a similar community in Canada. I grew up in a very
Mhm.
small community in the east coast of Canada. Like there was like just a little over 1,000 people where I grew up.
Oh,
Everyone
wow.
literally knew everyone. And
Mhm.
I grew up in that small town, and I always longed to live in a city, and you'd watch TV shows and movies and like, oh my
Mhm.
God, it looks so amazing living in the city, so exciting. Here
Yeah.
I've got nothing. I've got nothing to do. I got trees. I can hit sticks on trees, and that's all. But I've lived I've lived now almost half of my life in giant cities around
Mhm.
Asia. I've lived in Seoul, I've lived in,
Oh,
Kobe, which
wow.
is I've lived in Beijing, I lived in Shenzhen, and now I'm kind of in the countryside of Malaysia.
Yeah, I see the background is like
Oh,
forest.
oh, it's it's jungle. I'm
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's pretty countryside, that's for sure. But it's I reflect back on those times. I'm really thankful that I grew up where I did. But you had that life, and your father. I think a lot of people, definitely a lot of people who follow me on YouTube. I'm kind of a YouTube contemporary, I suppose. I was making content around the same time, and what
Mhm.
I think the one thing that I talked about with your father a few weeks ago was that one of the things that people were drawn to him and his content so much was that most people are like, look, it's Osaka. I live in Osaka. I live in
Yeah.
Tokyo. Bright lights, big city, flash, 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 and that's exciting and that's really cool. But he was showing a really different angle on Japan that most people didn't even know or think about. And now there's this big not a resurgence. There's a new trend where
Mhm.
it's all over the news about IKEA and people wanting
Oh,
to
yeah.
go to Japan and to go to these rural areas. And during the COVID years, a lot of people wanted to get out of Tokyo, like Japanese people, and reconnect with that slower pace of life. And we had that ability to work at home and to kind of slow things down. So it's really cool that
Yeah.
again a lot of people are wanting that kind of life.
Yeah,
Um
I feel like what my dad captured, in what, 2010 or like that the 2010s, like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
or even early 2000s, that was more like real Japan, like the side of Japan that nobody really sees, but is so real. And majority of Japan is like that actually. Like the
Yeah.
cities are so they seem so big, but it's actually like not even like a majority of it's like so small. It's a small portion of
Mm.
Japan that gets captured so many times and so
Yeah.
much it gets so
Yeah.
much attention that it may seem like all of Japan is like Tokyo or
Yeah.
all of Japan is like Osaka, but no, like I'd say like more than like 80% of Japan is like Shizuoka, is like a small town suburb or like farmers and all that. So
Mm.
I think it was a cool spotlight that my
Yeah.
dad
Yeah.
gave to that side of community. But
Yeah.
yeah.
No, absolutely. And I mean, okay, so in when you were 14, you made the move back to America.
Yes.
And I've seen my own kids go through transitions, as we were a very international family. And gonna be honest, when they're younger, it's a lot easier, because they're not so aware of friendships. They're just with mommy and daddy, and they just go where mommy and daddy go, and they're not really questioning things. and there's not, like, not a lot of deep thought. Like if they got their toys, they got their iPad, they got those things
Yeah.
with them, then they're just kind of a-okay. But I have to admit, my kids were younger than you, but like the
Mhm.
most recent transition, and there's going to be another transition coming up probably in the next year or two for us, was tougher. It was definitely tougher. It was harder because my daughter didn't want to leave
Yeah.
China because for warts and all, that's a place she was from 4 to 10 years old, and that's like a really
Mhm.
formative time. She didn't want to go. She had friends, dear friends, and things were great for her. So it was a tough transition. So how was that transition for you when you moved to America for the first
Um,
time in memory? I suppose you don't remember that 1 to 2 or the 0 to 2 part, but
oh, no, I don't remember anything. My first memory is in Japan,
mm,
so I only know my life in America when I was, like, 1, like, 0, 1, 2, like, I only know it through pictures.
yeah, yeah.
But, the second move that we did when I was 14, I was just like your daughter, like, I did not wanna go. But
Mm,
I knew I didn't have a choice because I was just, like, still, a young teen, like, I still would go to wherever my parents would go, like, I was excited as well because 'cause I've seen, like, oh, like, America, USA, like, on TV, but, like, I
mm,
just never thought it was gonna happen to me,
yeah.
but so I was a little excited, and my friends were really jealous of me. Like, my friends were like, "Oh, you're going to America, that's so cool." So I was like, that made me feel better about myself, but
Oh,
also
yeah,
I was
okay.
really scared. I don't know if you know this, but I didn't speak English when I was little. Like,
Oh, I didn't know that.
no, so when I was 14, like, my dad, I'm sure he told you, he doesn't speak Japanese that much, and I also didn't speak English, so, like, when we
Mm,
communicated when I was little, or, like, when we were in Japan was very, like, body language and a lot of,
um,
like, a mixture of Japanese and English, like, mixed together. We had our own language, and we had our own way of communicating, and that was not enough for me to get by America, of course, so
yeah,
I
yeah,
had to really adjust to a new country when I was 14, not knowing any English and had to
mm,
navigate everything alone. I have no siblings. I don't have any siblings, so I was pretty much on my own, like, at school, I was, figuring out how to make friends for the first time, like, I've never had that problem growing up, and it's such a small community, like,
yeah,
my friends came wherever I went, like, elementary school, middle school, like, I always had friends that I've known forever ago, since
yeah.
forever ago. So, like, learning how to make new friends was a struggle on its own, and then having to
Mhm.
do that in a foreign language that I never,
Wow.
like, mastered.
Yeah.
So, it was definitely hard for me, it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm 24 right now,
Mm.
but in my 24 years of my life, that was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
There were a couple times where I like oh, so I came to we moved to America in May of 2015, and I was 14 at the time.
Okay.
And since then, for about 6 months, I couldn't eat food because of stress. Like, I
Um,
was so stressed that I didn't wanna go to school, and
mm.
I would only eat fruits. Like, I would only eat, like, watermelons and strawberries because those were the only things that I could keep down.
Oh, no.
So, it was definitely hard for me to
Mm.
adjust to a completely new culture. I was a pretty shy kid as well, and a shy Japanese kid coming to California, and, like,
With no
I just
English. It's
with
just like
no
the
English,
perfect storm of awful, right? Like for
and
for a teenager.
that year I started high school. I was a ninth grader for the first time, so jumping into high school in that state was a nightmare, to say
Mm.
the least.
Yeah.
Um, but I will say me being thrown into that position with no, like, help, I mean, my parents definitely helped me, but at school, I was on my own. So that really, um, I guess I became more independent for sure, and I became more aware of my social skills, and I had to improve on that as well. So,
Mhm.
it was a very big struggle, but I think I came out on the other side, better because of it.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's gonna grow a level of perseverance and toughness that I mean, I say testing your metal, you were just thrown
Yeah.
into it. Um, yeah, wow, that's really something else. I mean, when I look back at again, there's the age difference. My kids were really
Yes.
young, and I guess in a similar way, like in Kobe, my kids, I was teaching at an international school, but it was kind
Mhm.
of, um, how shall I? So normally when someone like me who's an international school teacher, I come to different places and I'm given a salary, but there's often what we call a package. So
Mhm.
the tuition for my children is normally included. My kids go to the school I work out for free. But I was what they call a local hire in Japan, which means I didn't have that luxury. So I couldn't
Mhm.
afford to send my kids to the international school. So they went to public school, which was great. That's fine. Public kindergarten and shogako. But
Yeah.
it was the same thing. It was a very Japanese community, and people think of, oh, Kobe is the international place. Well, like if you're downtown, it is. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
historically it was, but I mean, I lived in a kind of like a small neighborhood, and no one spoke English, like no one.
Mhm.
But my Japanese wasn't great by any means. But we made a kind of rule in my house that we would try to use my house would be an English bubble. And that would be the
Oh.
place where my wife would only speak English in the house to the kids. I would speak English to the house because all day outside of the house, they would be in a Japanese world. And then when I came home from work for like a couple of
Mhm.
hours a day while they were still awake, we would try to make it an English bubble. So we had it wasn't great, but we could communicate. But then they went abroad, but again, they were so young. And then they went to international school where no one spoke Japanese, so it was
Mhm.
sink or swim. But again, that younger age, there's challenges, but the kids are like sponges at that age too. They just
Yeah.
acquire language like that, right?
Mhm.
And within a year, they both sounded like native English speakers, and so then we went through the whole reversal of language kind of challenges, which with any international family who wants bilingual children, there's always going to be a dominant language, right? And that flipped from
Definitely.
Japanese to English.
Mhm.
So even like right now as we record, it's Saturday morning here. My daughter is in Hoshuko. She's in a Japanese
Mhm.
school, Saturday school,
Oh.
which a lot of big cities around the world or even smaller cities have where there is a Japanese expat community. They tend to have
Mhm.
these Saturday school programs, which
Yeah,
are
we have
usually
those too.
okay. Yeah, yeah, I know those
Yeah.
huge ones. My wife's got a friend, a Japanese friend, who's in Chicago right now with her, and her son goes to one that's massive. But
Mhm.
so like my son did that right up until he finished Shogako, and then now he's not. Now he's a teenage boy who's sleeping. But now, but my daughter, like every Saturday, she goes and she's not studying in Japanese, she's studying Japanese, so like Japanese curriculum.
Oh.
So
Okay.
she's studying like all those different subjects. But for her and my son now, definitely it's their kind of weaker language, Japanese. So I'm curious, before we talk about like the other transition now going the other way,
Mhm.
what about language? How has that worked with you? I mean, you came to America, you didn't have English, you clearly have
Yeah.
English now. You sound
Oh,
like a
thank
native English, you sound like a
oh,
native English speaker. I mean,
thank you.
and that's except for with the cool part is I love this when I hear people, well, when you pronounce a place name in Japanese, because then you're pronouncing it the proper way, the Japanese way, instead of being like, I live in Kobe, Japan, you know,
Joker.
Tokyo, Kyoto. No, you're not doing that, obviously. But so how about Japanese over the years? In America, how did you work on keeping that up?
Well, I'm lucky to say my first language is Japanese.
Mhm.
I think it used to be English when I was little, but my parents also try to have a English bubble at my house as well, like the same thing as you.
Yeah.
But it didn't work on me because I was very stubborn and I wanted to
Uh,
watch Japanese TV shows and I wanted to have my friends over and only
yeah.
speak Japanese and I was just like not
Well, I mean, we did that too. We weren't like hardcore. We weren't like, oh no,
yeah.
this was like in the pre-Netflix days. So my kids only watch Japanese TV and
Yeah,
they
sorry.
yeah, yeah, no problem. And I mean, they had their little friends over, but that would be Japanese.
Yeah.
We tried,
Well,
but my kids were kind of receptive to it.
I was very stubborn. I thought me speaking English would make me a little like different from my friends, and I really wanted to fit in with my friends. And
Yeah.
there's obviously like an appearance difference. Like I look different than most of the kids I know at school. So
Mhm.
I really wanted to fit in. I think that's where it comes. Like I did not want to speak English in front of friends.
Mm,
I saw my childhood best friend the other day when I visited Japan over the summer last year. And she mentioned to me that there was an occasion where we were at Kokoichi, the curry place,
yeah, yeah.
by Shizuoka, and then there was this a woman, a foreigner person. They were like struggling to read the menu, and I was like 7 or 8, and apparently I went up to go help her, but I made all my friends step outside so they wouldn't see me
Oh,
speaking
okay.
English to her
Oh,
because I was so embarrassed of speaking English in front of my friends. I don't know why. I think I was just embarrassed to be different. So my English level obviously was so low, and I came here, and my first language is Japanese. I'm more comfortable speaking Japanese, I want to say.
yeah,
But maintaining Japanese in a foreign country right now, I think is easier than ever. We have social media, we have streaming services, we have
yeah,
all these tools to keep up with like the slangs or keep up with what they're saying now, like how to speak properly, like all that stuff. I didn't really have a lot of Japanese friends here. I mean, I had a couple. I had like two or
mm,
three Japanese friends, but the only person that I would consistently speak Japanese to was my mom.
yeah,
And no offense to my mom, but she doesn't know any like slangs or she doesn't know like the
yeah.
young
Of
people
course, of
language.
course.
So to keep up with like all that stuff, I definitely watched a lot of YouTube. Like
Yeah,
YouTube was my number one tool to keep up with like what they're saying now. Like, oh, what are the new trends? Like definitely like
yeah,
all those things. I want to say like YouTube and also like streaming services, like watching dramas and all that really helped me maintain the level of Japanese that I have right now. But I really struggle with Keigo, like the
oh, okay,
formal
yeah, yeah, yeah,
language. I was only 14 when I came here, and I know a lot of Japanese students establish Keigo and like the formal way of speaking in middle school and high school when they have
okay,
senpais and when they have like teachers you have to refer to a certain way.
yeah,
And I never had that experience. I only had that experience for 1 year and then I
uh,
moved here. So I never really established a comfortable level of Keigo until now when I have to actually actively use Kaggle in a workplace. So I'm like relearning Kaggle on YouTube. I'm like watching YouTube videos on how to like use this Kaggle in a certain way or like how to
yeah,
use this sentence in a situation. So but like I want to say like we have it so lucky right now where we can look up everything and we can listen to examples and how to say certain things. And trends are so, they come and go, but we can always look them up and
yeah.
watch
Absolutely,
watch
right.
YouTube videos.
Yeah, that's like one of the cool things, like for me now. Even just kind of if I want to brush up on my Japanese right now, and like Instagram, there's so many cool, young, hip Japanese kind of like language teachers who are focusing and targeting foreigners who don't speak Japanese, and they're teaching in English, and they teach like
Mhm.
lots of different interesting styles, and they're doing like comedic things and like really kind of
Yeah.
engaging ways of teaching. Um, and it's really cool. It's way better than when I was taking Japanese classes in Japan, learning Keigo before I learned anything else. So then in that case, the way I spoke was like really unnatural and bizarre when I'd go to meet like my wife's like, family in the countryside, and they're like, "Wow, why does Kevin talk this way?" Um, but yeah, wow, that's okay. So that's really cool. That's so
Yes.
now you're transitioning to back to Japan. You've gone to university. I think you studied marketing. Is that correct? Is that
Oh, that is kind of, yeah. My
so
major
what's
is
happening
communication.
now? What's like
Oh.
you're finishing university, you went to university, and let's talk about this transition. What are you going to be doing, and why back to Japan?
I
You're a
get
California girl now, right?
I know. I feel like I've been told that I'm too American for Japan now
Really?
by my Japanese coworker.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so I studied communications, concentrated in public relations
Oh,
at
okay,
Cal
okay.
State. But I was a part of a business club slash fraternity focused on marketing, sales, and management. So
Okay, okay.
I know a little bit about marketing. I know a little bit about sales, but my main focus was public relations, and I
Okay.
write a lot. Like I write press releases a lot, and I do all
Okay,
that
okay.
like creative writing stuff.
Hmm.
And I got an internship at a Japanese company. It was a startup company, and I got an internship. I was a PR intern for them.
Okay.
So that's why I went to Japan last summer for 2 months. I was in Tokyo for 2 months for the first time. Like I lived in Tokyo for the first time, and it was actually like a culture shock for me, like coming from
Mm.
Shizuoka to
Yeah,
Tokyo
yeah,
because I was
yeah.
like, whoa, like people in Tokyo are so different than people in Shizuoka. Um, but yeah, so I did that for 2 months, and now that company is offering me a full-time position as their PR person. So I
Okay.
will be taking over that role starting in July.
Mm,
But yeah, that is my path for now, and
yeah.
why Japan? I get that question a lot. Like whenever I see people, they're like, "Oh, like why would you want to go back to Japan? Like you're in America. Like that's so cool." But I feel like for me, it is a lot about being mixed or hafu. Like,
Mm,
I'm sure a lot of hafu kids or other people like with multicultural backgrounds can relate to me, but for me, in Japan, I loved growing up in Japan, and I
mm,
wouldn't change it for anything, but I feel like I didn't truly belong there.
mm.
And not just because of my race or anything, it was just more like a cultural thing where
Yeah,
I knew that my personality and my like identity didn't always fit the Japanese norm.
yeah.
And that kind of comes from my dad as well. Like my dad is like American. So I
Mm,
do have a couple of like we share some values, and I do have some of the personalities I have right now I got from my dad. And I also have most of my personalities I get from my mom. So it's mixed.
yeah.
And when I came here, I was expecting to actually fit in here, like, oh, I can like truly be my like American self or whatever that is. But now, here, spending 10 years here, I realized I actually don't belong here either. Like
Mm,
now I'm longing for the Japanese community. Like I miss being in Japan. I miss the safe community, and I miss being so close with everybody, like especially in Shizuoka. Like we were so close with everybody
yeah,
that I miss that, and I miss like sharing my Japanese values with people. Like of course we have Japanese Americans, and we have people who grew up in Japan, like will come here and we will like share some values, but the full like the whole having multicultural background thing for me, I've never related fully to anybody. Like no matter where I go, like which country I'm in, I feel like I'm always longing for the other culture. Like I always want to belong
yeah,
in one mold, and I don't fit that one mold.
yeah.
So then that comes back to the Tokyo thing. When I was in Tokyo, I felt like that was where I'm supposed to be. Like Tokyo is so international, and there are
Mm,
so many people like me, like who share the exact same background, like half people or mixed race people or like multicultural backgrounds. Like there's so many global international people just living in Tokyo, living their best life, and I felt like that's my community. Like
yeah,
Tokyo and Japan, like I still get the Japanese values, I still get, all the good things about Japan, but it's not the countryside. It's more welcoming. It's more
yeah.
open arms. I felt more at home being surrounded by people who share the same experiences as me. And that is, I think, the number one reason I want to go
Mm,
back to Japan. And I'm getting a job in Tokyo, and I'm gonna be living in Kanagawa just because it's a lot cheaper than
yeah,
living in Tokyo. So I will be commuting like 40 minutes
yeah.
to my
Okay.
work, but it's not bad. Like California time, like 40 minutes isn't that
Yeah,
much
it's
of a
nothing like
commute.
in the car, like especially if you're coming
No.
from like Los Angeles or something where it's so
Yeah.
infamous, all those travel times. And that's really fascinating to hear that kind of perspective because that's one of the things that I often think about, especially because I am teaching in an international school setting
Mhm.
and like it's so diverse where I'm currently teaching, an extremely diverse community, and there's some kids from all over the world who are in my class. I teach grade two.
Mhm.
So I'm teaching little people. But I mean, English is the language that connects them all. I've got Chinese kids, I've got Japanese, Russian, Danish, Swiss, British,
Mhm.
American, Canadian. I've got kids who are born in one country but never lived there. I've got kids who've lived in different countries all around the world. And I think of my own kids. And one of the things I often wonder is where are they going to end up?
Yeah.
Because working in international schools for so long, I meet third culture kids. And that's the term they talk about, the third culture kids.
Mhm.
So, like here we are right now. My kids have a parent who's from Canada. They've got one who's from Japan, and we're living in Malaysia. And before that, we were living in China. So it's really true. And there's a lot of identity questions that they ask themselves now, and it's probably going to get deeper. Like, who am I? Where am I from? Like, what's going on
Yeah.
here? But the one thing that I do notice with a lot of the kids who go through an international school system and are the third culture kids is that they
Mhm.
don't have boundaries. They feel like there's no box that they have to be within. Like growing up in small town Canada, you meet people, which is probably very similar to growing up in Shizuoka. There's a lot of
Mhm.
people who are like, people say, there's more job opportunities maybe in Tokyo, and they're like, I can't
Mhm.
go to Tokyo. Why? Because I'm not from there, I'm from here. I'd meet people
Mhm.
like that in Canada. Why would I go to Toronto? I'm from
Mhm.
here. And it's just, and I would scratch my head like, what do you mean you're from here, but you can go and work in other places? They're like,
Oh, wherever
no,
you
but
want
I'm,
to go.
but I'm from here. I have to
Yeah.
stay here. This is where I stay. Um,
Mhm.
but again, those the third culture kids I meet, like really like they have that Canadian parent, the Japanese parent, but they're going to go to university in Belgium, or they're going to go to university in Switzerland because
Yeah.
that's where the program is that they want to go into. And again, that so far away from home, but where is home? I go where I need to go to do the things I need to do,
Mhm.
and it's kind of neat. So again, like maybe you didn't envision yourself when you were in California, when you maybe after a few years of heading back to Japan, but there you are.
Oh,
And I wonder if
no,
my
not
own
at all.
kids, I wonder if my own
Yeah.
kids maybe will one day, because I say that to them. I'm like, don't just, I know your Japanese isn't strong anymore, and you don't, you wouldn't be able to probably function in a Japanese company, but there's a lot of global companies, and there's a
Mhm,
lot of people doing neat things in business in different types of industries in a place like Japan who
mhm.
who aren't fluent, or maybe
Yeah.
speak fluently but don't read and write fluently. Like I just say, don't limit yourself to say, oh, my Japanese isn't so good anymore, because there may be
No.
opportunities there may be opportunities in Canada or anywhere else.
No, that is so true because I have a friend in my business club. He is half Japanese, half American, just like me, but he grew up in California. So his Japanese is his second language. So he can speak okay, he can understand things okay, but he has trouble reading and writing. And
Mm.
he he's not Japanese isn't his first language, obviously. And we actually went to a career fair together, and he got more opportunities than me. Like, he got more offers
Oh,
from
really?
Japanese companies than me because he has the global, like, mindset. He is American, so he's more, like, open to talking to people casually. He's, like, more open to going in for a handshake, and it's like me still, my core values are still
Okay.
Japanese, so I'm more like, "Oh, when I'm meeting new people, I gotta, like, step back, and I'm a little nervous," but,
Mm.
like, people who even don't even speak Japanese fluently, like, they have so many opportunities, and I whenever somebody says, "Oh, like, I don't speak Japanese well, like, I don't think I can work for a Japanese company," like, no, like, people want you for what you can do, not, like, what you can speak. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
that
yeah.
is definitely so true.
True, that perspective is incredible, right? Like, and again, the
Mhm.
people who've had those opportunities to live in different cultures and have even from the multicultural background, they just have perspectives that are very attractive,
Yeah.
and that's those kids who are third culture kids, for example. I know a lot of companies find them very attractive because they're
Mhm.
so adaptable and they're so diverse, and they really think outside the box. I know those are like cliched terms and all, but it is true. Because I see those kids and I compare them to me, like a little, like when I was a Canadian kid growing up, my world was so insular and like
Mm.
you know and it had nothing to do with like the lack of social media in those days or something. It was just literally, my perspective was that of like a white waspy kid growing up in a small town in Canada, and all my teachers had the same background, and there was no diversity in my classrooms. And yeah, I went to a bigger high school, but there was still no diversity. So it's pretty cool that you're making this step. So do you think in the future, do you think that's a permanent move, or do you think you're open
Oh,
to going back to America, here, there, wherever
I'm
fortune
open
may
to
take you?
I I feel the you mentioned being adaptable was one of the biggest thing, and it is the biggest value that I learned
Mhm.
from moving here. For me,
Okay.
like being adaptable, like being able to adapt to anything. I
Mm.
mean, I was more like dragged here. Like I wasn't like it wasn't my will to
Yeah,
come
yeah.
here, but I came here anyway, and I figured it out. Like it was really hard, but I made
Mm,
it a home. Like this is
yeah.
my home right now, and I really enjoyed my time here, and I feel like I've done it once, I can do it so many other times. Like, I can do it it's not like, "Oh, I did it once and I'm done with it." Like, I
Yeah.
know I can do it. So,
That's very
me, deciding to move to Japan was a last minute decision for me. I
okay.
decided that I was gonna move to Japan and start a career there last year. It wasn't something that I had it planned for, like,
Okay,
years
okay.
in advance. It was
The
more like, "Oh, like"
opportunity
yeah.
presented itself, and you're like,
Yeah,
"Let's go for
exactly,
it."
and I was like, "Oh, like, I'll go for it and see what it how it happens," and now it's actually happening, and I will admit I'm a little scared, like, it's my first time going back to Japan as an adult, so I don't have, I don't have anybody's hand to hold on to. I'm just navigating everything on my own. But I know I can do it because I've done it before.
Yeah.
So it is more of a I feel like for a lot of young people who experienced like moving to different countries and all that, like we have that confidence of no matter what, like we've done it once, we can do it again,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
mentality. And I'm sure your kids as well, they for sure will have that mentality. They've gone to so many
Mm,
places. They know, like,
yeah.
they've done it once, they've done it twice, they can do it so many more times.
Yeah.
Um, but for me, coming back here, like, moving to Japan isn't a permanent decision for me. It is more like I don't know if you can hear the airplane. Sorry if you do. There's
No,
an
it's
airplane
okay.
flying over me.
We're good.
Um, it is I wanna go to Japan as I'm actually 23. I said I was 24 earlier, but I'm turning 24 this year. As a new like I'm graduating college and I want to get the first like 1, 2, 3 like first couple years of experience in Japan because I feel like Japanese culture has a lot of respect. They value a lot of respect and they value a lot of like kind of be more I don't know how to explain it like be I guess put together, like as like a first few years of entering into adulthood. Like they
Mhm.
really will teach you how to be respectful. They
Oh,
will
okay,
really
I
teach
gotcha.
you how to be a certain not a certain way, but like to be, I guess, Japanese. And I kind
Mm,
of wanted to regain that experience as an American person. I feel like I'm
yeah.
very Americanized. I sense that I am losing my Japanese like values a little bit
Okay,
coming
yeah.
here for so being here for so long. So I kind of wanted to um go into that and kind of be taught those
Mm,
values
mm,
again in me.
yeah.
And then I'll figure it out after a
Yeah.
couple of years. I haven't really
Exactly.
figured it out, but I have dual citizenship, so I can always come back here. I can
Yeah.
always, travel the world. It's
Mm.
not nothing's restricting me right
Yeah,
now.
that's so cool. Awesome. Awesome. Well, I don't want to keep you any longer. It's night there, it's evening there. Thank you so much, Emily, for coming on the
Of
podcast and
course.
sharing your
Thanks for
story. Really appreciate it. And I find this really fascinating again, too, just because of my family situation and with my
having
kids. And I wonder, gosh, what it's going to be like for them. And
me.
as they get older, it's fun watching all the transitions, and sometimes I feel a bit stressed watching the stress they go through. But tis life, right? And they're now at an age where they will start learning. Well, they are learning how to navigate the waters themselves. That's part of adolescence and stuff like that, where we as parents have to stand back and say, yeah, we can't help them anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got a fascinating story, and thanks for sharing it with us.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Okay, cool.